Hey, today I'm really excited about our service. I can't tell you how fired up I am. I think God is going to do something significant in all of our hearts and lives. Some of you may know this because you've been following us on social media, but we have today 4 churches, 4 pastors, all of us with one voice coming together in unity. It is beautiful, as some put, maybe unprecedented to see the beauty and the unity that is taking place. But I want to share a passage of scripture from John chapter 4. In this story, and I encourage you to read it later in the week, Jesus talks with a Samaritan woman. And to some of us, we're like, why is that significant at all? But I want to share some of these verses here to get our hearts ready for what we're about to step into. Again, John chapter 4, I want to begin reading in verse number 4. It says, now he had to go through Samaria. That he here is Jesus. Jesus had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, will you give me a drink? His disciples had gone into town to buy food. Verse number 9, the Samaritan woman said to him, you are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Back in Christ's day, the Jews and the Samaritans had a lot of issues. There was a lot of tension between them. Now, there were a bunch of similarities, but there were also some differences. And these differences for them created a chasm. There were some Samaritans that were accused of actually vandalizing, if you will, the temple. They took some bones and threw these bones in the temple. What they were essentially doing to the church is they were desecrating it. They were making the temple unclean, or taking something unclean and throwing it into the temple. This infuriated a bunch of the Jews. Not only that, some Samaritans, from what we understand on this road between Galilee and Judea, they would take pilgrims, Jews that were on their way, and they would just pester them, bother them as they were walking through the Samaritan town. There's even stories about Jews burning the villages of some Samaritans. Tension, issues, problems. Maybe you've got some friends like this that you have problems with. Maybe you have some family members you have this type of tension with. Maybe some of you are living in communities where there's this type of tension. I know in America and in Guatemala and other parts of the world, there's all types of tension around all different sorts of things. Who'd you vote for, and what color are you, and what language do you speak, and what side of the tracks are you from? What school did you go to? What neighborhood do you live in? All of us feel at times like we are being judged by people on either side. So here it is, this woman's stating the obvious: Jews don't talk to Samaritans. Here's one of the things that's beautiful about Shoreline City. You saw it. You've seen it with our worship team. You've seen it with our staff. You've perused the website. You've looked at the app, and you can see this potpourri of people from all different walks of life coming together. It is so beautiful to see what God has done, bringing his sons and daughters together in a world where maybe Jews and Samaritans do not interact with each other. It has not been that way at Shoreline City. We've seen the exact opposite. We've seen Jews and Samaritans coming together. We've seen different languages coming together. We've seen different backgrounds coming together. And isn't this what the church ought to be doing? Shouldn't we be the place where walls are torn down and people come together? Jesus even prayed. He said, God, would you make my followers one like you and I are one? Then he said, hey, this is how people are going to know that you're my disciples. Here it is. This is how they're going to know: if you have love for each other. Today, we're going to learn how to love each other better. Today, me and these friends of mine, we're going to come together and we're going to learn and grow together at all of our churches. And every one of us, we're going to leave this time together And we're going to be pushed forward in our walk with God. And our heart's going to be opened even more. And we're going to be willing, like Jesus, to sit at some wells with some people that may look different from us. But as we do that, we're going to see the grace of God flood our lives, and we're going to be a part of making it on earth as it is in heaven. Let's jump in together.
Someone might sin differently than you, but they're really no different than you. They're just imperfect like you in another area.
It's enough to take me from darkness to light. It's enough to take me from lost to found. It's enough.
Number one, if you want to move from your falling back to your calling, you got to do one thing: get up.
The next time the enemy comes in trying to destroy your life, you ought to grab the sword of the Lord and start swinging it and say, "Get thee behind me. I serve a God who's greater."
Welcome. We're so glad that each and every one of you guys are here. And man, what an amazing group of guys we have with us. And we're all together today. I don't know that this has ever been done before. We have 4 pastors from 4 different backgrounds, from 4 different churches, 4 different cities. And we're all talking with one voice today. We got Jimmy Rollins from I-5 City in Baltimore. We have Earl McClellan from Shoreline City in Dallas. And we have Chris Durso from Saints Church in New York City. I'm Jeremy with Hope City in Houston, Texas. And man, guys, I'm so honored to be with each of you. You guys are all looking sharp. Earl, I mean, you look like you're in the military. You look amazing. That jacket has to be hot because you on fire, baby.
Thank you.
We're going to have a great time today, and we're going to be talking about something that we feel like needs to be talked about. We had a conversation a few weeks ago, and it's something that our nation has needed to talk about for a long time, and that's the topic of racism, bigotry, hatred, and truly just valuing difference. If we would just get to a point where we value difference. Here's the truth. Children are not born racist. It's something that they learn over time. Here's what we do know. They're not born racist. They're not born bigoted, but they are born with the ability to see difference. And over time, if difference isn't valued, then difference is feared. And what's feared is rejected. My brother, his daughter, they live in New Orleans. His daughter's 9 years old, and she's in a predominantly African-American dance troupe. And when I say predominantly African-American, she's the only little white girl in the dance troupe. And it's the cutest thing because this girl's got moves. I mean, she can shake. She can shake. She's good. She got it. And so she did a little Christmas program with all the girls in the dance troupe. And she was talking to her mom and dad right before it started. She said, "Mom, Dad, here's how you're going to be able to tell it's me. Here's how you're going to be able to see me amongst all the other girls. I'm going to have the pink tutu on. A bunch of them were wearing purple. Some of them were wearing red. I'm the only one wearing pink." And my brother was like, "Got it. I think we'll be able to see you." Shining white face. And I love that because what's happened is she's learned the value of difference. And over time, if you don't expose your children to difference and the value of difference, then they'll be afraid of it. Nelson Mandela said, kids aren't born with hatred. You're not born to hate. You're taught to hate. And if you can be taught to hate, then you can be taught to love. And there's 4 things that we want to give you today that we think will teach you to love, that we think will teach you to value difference. And the first one is simply this. You have to listen intently. You have to listen intently. You can't listen hoping you get an opportunity to talk. You have to listen in order to listen. And having said that, I want to pitch the first question to Jimmy Rollins, I-5 City in Baltimore. Such a powerhouse pastor, man. I've heard a lot of people say this. You know, I'm colorblind. I don't see color. Now, it's mostly white people who say that. So tell me, is it bad to see color, or is that something that we shouldn't do?
Well, first, thank you for asking the question. Thank you for hosting and being a part of allowing us to be a part of the conversation. Our church is really trying to pave the way here in our city in diversity. And I think, Jeremy, the question that you're asking and posing is so important because, you know, even when we're talking about TV, like if I told you, that you weren't going to look at a color TV, you'd be like, "No, I see color," right? But the value of seeing color is important. Like, I am black, you are white. Like, you do wear cowboy boots. I do wear J's. Like, it's okay, like, to see our differences. We are different. I am different. My hair is different. I get ashier a lot faster even than Earl. You know what I mean? Like, we all are different, even within the same ethnic background. And what I've come to find out with this whole listen, that people don't want to listen to our differences. And here's the thought that I have, is simply this, that if you don't acknowledge my differences, you won't appreciate my experiences. And so if we don't acknowledge each other's differences, I don't believe that we can say, yes, your experience is different. And so I think in this thing of listening is, if we're going to listen, let's listen not to respond, but let's listen to understand.
That's great. And Chris, your experience is varied and different in New York City. You were raised in New York City. What is your experience with racism in New York City? I mean, obviously it's still prevalent. What is your experience?
Yeah, I mean, racism is prevalent. It happens in New York. I grew up seeing different variations of it. But I'll tell you what, the most shocking moment for me in my life was actually not in New York. It was actually while I was going to school in Cleveland, Tennessee. And I'll never forget one of my classmates looking at a picture of my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. And my wife is Colombian and German. And he looked at the picture and he goes, she looks white, but she don't look white. And he goes, what nationality is she? And I said, well, she's Colombian and German. And he goes, Colombian? Is that like Mexican? And I was like, no, that's like Colombia. It's like a completely different,
like not at all.
Different country. And then he looked at me and he paused for a second and he goes, man, my church would never allow that. And that was the moment that my mind was blown, because I've never seen racism within the church. So I've seen it in other places. I've seen it on media. I've seen it on news. I've had different moments growing up. But when I realized that racism was in the church, that a church would say, stay within your people group, only date people or marry people that look like you. That's where my whole mind was blown. And I thought, man, we have to shift this whole narrative. That can't exist in the church, because that's not who Jesus is.
Well, we have to confront it. If you don't, you'll lose what you won't confront. And if we don't confront this, then we lose the value in our difference. Earl, a lot of people say that, I don't know, race is not an issue for me. Can you talk towards that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Both Jimmy and Chris are bringing up some beautiful points, and I love the story about your niece, right? Saying, "I'm the one in the pink." How adorable is that? But in this world that we live in, I heard a friend of mine. He was talking about in his book. It's called The Third Option. And in this book, he's talking about something called right-hand bias. I'd never heard of this before. Now, I actually am right-handed. And I don't really ever think about left-handed people. None of my kids are even left-handed. But he was talking in the book about how this world that we live in was built by right-handed people. And if you're right-handed, you're like, what are you talking about? But every left-handed person knows exactly what I'm talking about. Because when you go get a coffee mug, it's built for a right-handed person. You got to hold it in your right hand, and the words are facing towards you. If you're left-handed, you're like, dag on it, the words are faced the wrong direction. If you're in school, you're trying to write on a really weird angle. Matter of fact, sometimes the right-handed person, I would see a left-handed person writing, and I'm like, why are you turning the paper like that? Yeah, why is your wrist doing that? And you can go down the line. Thing after thing after thing is built for right-handed people. Now, is it because right-handed people said, hey, we got a conspiracy against all left-handed people. Left-handed people, we can't stand you. No, I think they were saying, hey, we're going to try to build something that works for us, and we're not trying to necessarily think about other folks who don't have this same leaning. And I think the same thing has taken place in not only in America, but in all different parts of the world. And in America, I know very many times we talk about a black-white issue, but we have, obviously, Hispanics, and we've got Asians, and we've got Polynesians. We got folks from all different parts of the world. In Guatemala, you've got different issues happening. In other parts of the world, you've got different people groups. And whoever is in power is the one that builds a system that works for them. So in America, the ones who have built the systems, these were predominantly right-handed people.
Well, it's white people. And it's okay for us to say that because it's not my experience. And so we have to learn there's something else there that we need to learn from.
Exactly. So since we have a world that was built by right-handed people, or at least America and other parts of the world, whatever the right hand is, the people of power, we as the body of Christ, though, we have a call, an obligation, a mandate, honestly, an honor to be the ones that lean into not just the right hand, but also the left hand. And we get to be the ones that help bring both hands together, because we all know the right hand is not better than the left hand, and the left hand is not better than the right hand. But it's when our hands are working together that we're able to make it on earth as it is in heaven.
Yeah, that's what makes this conversation so beautiful, right? That's what makes it so needed, because even though we are in America, we are not building the church of America. We are building kingdom, and we love all people, and we want to see all people reached. That's why conversations like this are so important. They need to happen because we're not trying to build what someone else was building. We're trying to tear all of that down so we could build kingdom.
Amen. And the kingdom is crucially important. I mean, I think if you look at Jesus' message, it was constantly kingdom, 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 kingdom. That was the message of Jesus. And if you look at somebody who has a problem with their brother, it really doesn't have anything to do with their brother. It's usually a father issue. I have a problem with my brother because I have an issue with my father. And if I reconcile with my father, then I can actually restore with my brother. Look no further than Cain and Abel. Cain killed Abel not because he was mad at Abel. He killed Abel because he was mad at his father. And if I get reconciled with my father in the kingdom, then I can actually love my brother. Jimmy, you have a revelation on John chapter 4 when Jesus said, hey, I have to go through Samaria. I want you to talk about that, because when you told me about that, it was just mind-blowing.
Absolutely. Well, if you look at John chapter 4, the word talks about that Jesus was on his way to Galilee. And if you study that passage, many people would go around Samaria and avoid Samaritans. But Jesus says something. He changes the game, right? He decides to take this personal, and he decides, you know what, I'm going to lean in personally. And he says, we have to go through Samaria. You can't avoid it.
Right there, because that's really the second thing we really need to do. We can listen intently, but we also need to lean in personally.
Absolutely. We have to take it upon ourselves for all of us to go through Samaria. It is not the church in the hood's responsibility to go through Samaria. It is not people of just color, black people, to go through Samaria. Everybody has areas that they avoid because of the preferences that they have. And when Jesus says, I have to go through Samaria, he was leaning in personally, and he was changing the game, because he realized that if I'm going to reach and take this kingdom to Samaritan people, I'm going to have a conversation personally with a Samaritan woman. And that brings this kingdom mindset back into play. The kingdom mindset is the kingdom has a king. That kingdom has a government. That government has citizens. Those citizens are my brothers and sisters, that when I am in Christ, my ethnic culture is a subculture to the kingdom culture. Not that I neglect the black side of my hand, but I also look at the white side of my hand when we're talking about hands, but understanding that we are different. And many people have tried to avoid it, and they don't want to be in on hard conversations like I've had with my dad through this. And my dad telling me when he went to Vietnam and he was drafted by white America to go fight for a country that did not fight for black people. And when he was over there, all of the segregation and all of the people at the bar, the white people over here and the black people over here. And he even said this, the disparity went away when they were in the foxhole. And here's the deal. If we're all fighting for the same thing, which is kingdom, then the disparity goes away. And one of the most awful, tragic things that he said that he experienced there is when he was there, Martin Luther King was assassinated, and someone said to him, look, we killed your leader. This is someone he's fighting next to every single day. And so guess what? Yes, we have to take this personally to have these conversations so that we don't pass these down to our children. It's going to be us going through Samaria, talking to a Samaritan woman where everyone else goes off and does their own thing. And I love how Jesus modeled this. And let me encourage everyone who's listening to this. It's time for us to go through Samaria.
Chris, I think you have an understanding on this. I want you to expound upon the woman at the well a little bit more.
If you read in the Message translation, Eugene Peterson actually suggests, the way that he narrates the text, is that when the disciples came back and saw Jesus talking to the woman, it says, which we all know, they were wondering why he was talking to this woman. But the way the Message translation puts it is that their presence of shock was so overwhelming for her that she drops her water jug and leaves, as if she was good with Jesus, but now his disciples made her now feel those same feelings that were unfamiliar for the moment. They were gone for a few moments. And this is what we do. This is where we screw up, because the disciples aren't good followers. They show up and then after this beautiful conversation, they say something on the back end. And my prayer for this moment is that I'm praying, God, would your Holy Spirit fall in our homes and where people are watching it, so in such a way that disciple won't show up on the back end and then screw up the whole conversation and now make the person feel like they're no longer included, and like the moment of inclusion was just a 30-minute sermon. Like, this is how we're supposed to live, that we're supposed to be able to do this thing together forever. And it wasn't just a window of opportunity. That's why the woman leaves and goes back to the town. It's not necessarily that she was just excited. And I love that. I preached that point before. But what about the reality that she no longer felt welcomed after she got what she got from Jesus? And this is what Christians do. We screw it up so much because we like the idea of rolling with Jesus. But taking on his lifestyle and accepting a woman at midday that was a Samaritan, I like how that sounds. And guess what? They were used to that, by the way, because this was a culture of where religion was taught, not felt. Jesus actually had to send them away. What other time in the scripture do we find Jesus sending away his disciples so that he could be alone with a woman? The only other time we read in the disciple that Jesus sends the disciples away is when he goes on the side of the mountain to pray, and then they go into the lake. But this moment he had to send them away. Why? Because the disciples might have screwed up the whole conversation. I want to be the kind of disciple that stands with my brothers, no matter what they look like. Says, man, let's have all the tough conversations about anyone that's been marginalized.
I think this is what's got to happen. It's understanding and continued conversation. That's such a revelation, Chris, that Jesus can do the work and we can mess it all up if we don't have love one for another. Earl, what are your thoughts?
This is, again, a right-handed world, and I'm not even mad at that. That is what it is. I'm just trying to learn how to navigate as best I possibly can by being true to who I am, because I'm not trying to cover up being black. I love that I'm black. I love that God made me like this. I'm thankful for it. But I remember my son, when he was 4 years old, scratching his skin. And we're like, why are you doing that? He goes, well, I was wondering if this brown would come off. Well, I'm obviously not doing a good enough job. Painting a picture for you of how beautiful it is how God made you. Because he made you exactly how he was supposed to make you. And thankfully, he's 15 now and he's all about being black. so I'm glad we got that in line. But dang, man, I mean, this is the world. This is the world we live in. And again, I'm not even mad about it. It's just the reality. Gosh, man, this stuff is hard. There's no doubt about it.
Man.
I think for a lot of folks who are even watching this right now, we're uncomfortable with Samaria, as you said, because it's unknown, right? I mean, what's going to happen to me there? I see it on the news that this can happen or that can happen, or, all those people are like this or they're like that. And we're getting our information from social media or from news headlines. But just to make it really, really honest, and you shared that incredibly moving story about your father, hearing such difficult words in a foxhole. I mean, we bring this to the year that we are all in now. And right now, I do not feel the freedom to go and run in my neighborhood at night. Right now. And it's not because I believe everyone out there is a racist. I actually don't think that. I think most people are not racist. But what I do know is a lot of people have some bias towards a person of color. And I'm wondering if I'm running at night and I'm 6'2" and I'm 100 whatever pounds and I look a little bit intimidating. Who might they call on me? What might they do? And I just know these things are in my head. No, it might not even be reality. But some of the different things that happen in our day and age, like the shooting of this young man that took place, in February of 2020, it reminds me running could be problematic for me. Maybe even running during the day.
Well, you said something about how some of it might be in your head and some of it might be, that might not be real. But the truth is a lot of it is real. And a lot of the racism and bigotry and hatred is not called out enough. And I think it's not called out enough by white pastors. I think African-American pastors for a long time have been saying, hey, this is real, it's happening. But we have to actually do point number 3, and that is learn purposely. I have to actually purpose myself to learn what somebody else is going through. Jimmy, I've never been followed through a store, but you rarely go through a store where you're not followed. There are people watching right now who don't even know that exists. They don't even know that experience happens. In fact, I didn't know it until I built enough bridges and relationships where I could listen intently and hear somebody and learn purposely, and they tell me, hey, this is real. Can you tell me about your experience with some of that and some of the things that concern you as it pertains to your son and your family?
Absolutely. I think that what I'm finding is that most white people don't understand what it is like to enter into a room where you can't assume you're welcome. Entering into a room that you have to prove yourself that you're not what they saw on MSNBC or CNN or whatever news station that they have watched. It's hard to get past these stereotypical thoughts, and you want to introduce yourself to them, but all they see is your skin color. And they're waiting for how you talk. And then what we have is fear. We have, the African-American community fearing being accepted. And then we have the white community fearing, am I pigeonholed? Even my white friends who aren't racist, most of my white friends they're not racist, right? But what I have found out is when I enter into a room, there's 2 people. There's people that are ignorant of understanding what my everyday looks like, and then people who are intended. Ignorance and intention. That's where we're in between, or that's what we're fighting against. Ignorance is I don't know, I don't understand. Intention is I know and I chose not to be involved. It is I know and I chose not to care, or I know and I just chose to be racist. And I believe that we need to, once we know more, we have to do better. And every day we have to learn. Every day, Paul says, I became all things to all people in order to win the more. The Message translation says, I entered into their world and tried to experience things from their point of view. He goes on and says, I did it because of the gospel. The gospel message is for anybody, everybody, and everyone. If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. It says, for God so loved the world that whosoever. I want to be counted in the anyone, the everyone, and the whosoever. This is not a black gospel. This is not a white gospel. This is a red gospel. This is a Jesus gospel. Learn. We got to learn each other.
Well, and that's the truth. Compassion isn't compassion without courage. I can't just go, oh man, I wish that wouldn't have happened if I don't speak up, if I don't say something. Chris, I want to pitch it to you because Jesus's response was so powerful to this woman. What do you think our response should be as white pastors, as leaders, as people who understand more? How should we respond to this? With revelation comes responsibility. So what do we do about it?
Jesus knew what he was doing. he was talking to a woman. This is the male talking to a woman. Secondly, he's talking to a woman at midday, which would suggest that this woman had made some mistakes in her life. And thirdly, she was a Samaritan woman. And yet none of that stopped Jesus from having the conversation. Here's what I love about Jesus. He goes after it. He was intentional. He cared so much about this woman, just like Jimmy pointed out. He didn't go around Samaria like so many people did. He went through. And this is it right here. We can't just be aware of an issue and settle there. We have to be aware and respond. Because if you are aware of an issue, but not willing to take on the issue, you are the issue. And this is what we're talking about. So when you talk about white pastors are aware of something and choose not to do anything about it, this is the issue. It's not just offering empathy, but it's using our voices corporately, whether it's giving up a Sunday, whether it's utilizing social media. Let's have the conversation because it exists. And it exists so much, it's a problem that we're not going to just allow to linger. The same way that if there's a dirty pile in your home, you don't just leave the dirty pile there. If you have a light out in your home, you're not going to just leave it out. You fix it because it's a problem. This is a problem in our world, and yet it's been ignored for too long.
Earl, I want you to talk to that because your experiences are so powerful, and you're also a powerful man of God. You understand some things. She shows up at noonday in the heat of the day. What does that say about us?
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And Chris, you bring up such a great point. Here it is noon, right? And this woman shows up to draw water at noon. This is the Middle East. It's hot at noon. Why would she be there at that time? To your point, so many scholars are saying, hey, she's trying to avoid when everybody else goes there in the morning, bright and early, before the sun is able to rise. That's when everybody usually went, when it was nice and cool. But this woman goes at noon. She is willing to put herself, if you will, in a spot where it's hot and it's lonely. And I'm just wondering, what is she thinking on her way to the well? Like, what's going through her head? And I just wonder, what's going through the head of a lot of us, even as we're sitting here? Some of us are thinking, I'm so glad the church is finally having this conversation. And some people are thinking, I wish this conversation would go away. It makes me so uncomfortable. I'm not a racist. Matter of fact, I feel uncomfortable even talking about this because I don't even know what to say. And you, Chris, talking about conversation, and all of us talking about conversation, and what we're having here is a conversation. I think this woman, when she's on her way to the well, what Jesus does is he takes the mask off of her. He says, hey, you don't have to wear that thing anymore. You don't have to cover up anymore. You can, let me see your insecurity. Let me see your fear. Let me see that you don't know what to say or how to say it. And I think in the midst of this whole struggle, this whole issue, we got one pandemic going on in our world, but there's a whole nother issue going on right now, and that is individuals not being willing to say, I'm going to take off the mask and allow my Savior to get to the parts of me that he really needs to get to. And that's what Jesus is after. So even all of us on this call, none of us here are perfect. Jimmy and I can't speak for all black people. We don't even have women on here. We don't have Polynesians on here. We don't have Hispanics on here. There's a whole bunch of groups we don't have on here, but we all understand what it's like to wear a mask. We all understand what it's like to have self-talk that's tearing ourselves down. But Jesus here says, hey, I know about your life. You don't have to hide it anymore. Let's talk. And it's in that conversation that the freedom happened. And this woman turns her community right side up for the cause of Jesus Christ.
I think it's powerful too that Jesus constantly built bridges. If you look at the story of the Good Samaritan, Luke chapter 10, the Good Samaritan, a man asks Jesus, hey, what do I need to do? He tells him the first and greatest commandments. And the second is love your neighbor as yourself. And he says, well, who's my neighbor? And Jesus tells him this story about a guy who was beat up and left on the side of the road bleeding. And a priest walks by and gets on the other side of the street. And a Levite walks by and gets on the other side of the street. And then a Samaritan walks by who is essentially hated in the Jewish community. They had a problem in those days. And the Samaritan crosses from the other side of the street to the hurting man, heals his wounds, takes him to a hotel, pays the bill, and Jesus looks at him and says, who's the good neighbor here? And he says, well, it was the man who showed mercy. And I think it's unique that now it's not the priest, it's not the Levite, it's not the man it's not the Samaritan. He's known now by the fact that he showed mercy. And I think it's also unique that Jesus did not tell him who his neighbor was. I think that's our problem. We keep saying, well, who's my neighbor? And Jesus says, that's not the question. The question is, how do you be a good neighbor? And the way that I become a good neighbor is to go get into your world, ever how broken and busted up and messed up and whatever your experience is, I need to know it. I need to feel it. Jimmy, you have talked to me about conversations you've had with your son that I'll never have with my kids. In fact, Earl, Jimmy, Chris and I get to leave this conversation. You don't. Talk about the conversation you've had with Jaden, Jimmy.
My son, 17, and when he got his license, man, he was so excited. And honestly, the day he got his license, I cried that night. And my wife said, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "I'm realizing the conversations that I have to have with my son." And he reminded me during this whole, tragedy of, Ahmaud Arbery, he said, "There's not been one time since I got my license for the last year and a half that you have not texted me or said to me, hey, make sure you take your hood off. Hey, make sure you take your skull cap off. Hey, don't play your music too loud in the car." And he understands the why behind that. And I remember when he found out about Ahmaud Arbery, he said, "Dad, why is this happening?" And I said something that I want to take back at some point. I said, "This is just the world we live in." And I realized at that moment, but I also proclaim as a pastor that the church is the hope of the world. And the Bible says, like you said, Jeremy, when Jesus looked at the crowds, he had compassion on them. The problem is many pastors are only looking at the crowds inside the four walls of the church and not the crowds on the four corners of the earth. And it's time for us to look at the crowds and have compassion, because here's the deal. And I've decided, I'll be honest with you, when I see things like this, I want to quit. I want to give up. But I realize that my dad's sacrifice and my son's future empowers me to stay involved in the conversation and keep talking. Yes, some of you have the privilege of never having that conversation with any of your kids. And I want to be like that one day, that we can level the playing field. I don't want superiority. I just want equality. And here's the thing, anything short of equality is not progress.
That's the truth. Well, the bottom line is the world is not getting better. I keep hearing people say, well, the world's getting better, we're advancing. No, our technology is advancing. We're still the same people. We're still finding new ways to sin. And until we come to Jesus, change won't happen. Tim Ross said this. He said, "We will continue to legislate and incarcerate society in order to control the outcome unless we are restored to the Father." And I believe that's absolutely true. Chris, how do we do it, man? What do we do? How do we move forward from this?
Yeah, well, first off, I'm so sorry that we live in a world like this. And I wish I could apologize on behalf of all people. But I will say, as a pastor, it is our job to work from the inside of our churches and making sure that we're taking this Jesus message, this message of Jesus that says, I love all people and I'm for all people, no matter what they look like. Because remember, Jesus was an American and Jesus was not white. He had a message for all.
Say that again for the people in the back, because some people don't know that.
Right. Jesus was not American and Jesus was not white. He was for all people. And the fact of the matter is that we do live in a world that is getting darker and darker. This is the church's opportunity, though, to shine brighter and brighter. So we could work from the inside and have conversations and give up our Sundays and make sure that we rid our churches of racism. And we have conversations amongst the saints, amongst the believers, amongst the Christians, and make sure that there is no divide, because you can't be against someone else and for God. He says, I want you to love me, and just like you love me, I want you to love your neighbor. Which neighbor? All neighbors. The one that lives to the left of you, the one that lives to the right of you, the one that uses their left hand, and the one that uses their right hand. I want you to love them. And this should be our goal as a church from this moment forward. I love that I don't have to worry about my son. I hate that I have to worry about Jimmy's. I don't want us to worry about any of our children, because guess what? My son and Jimmy's son and Earl's son and Jeremy, your children, they're all friends and they love each other and they love Jesus. We should live in a world where anyone could jog wherever they need to jog and they could drive wherever it is that they feel like driving.
Man, I'm speechless. Earl.
To hear these words from you, to hear these words from you, men of God, means more to me than you could ever possibly imagine. And I know to all the churches and the people that are listening to this, I know these words have to mean something to you as well. Because here it is, we're saying we've all messed up. And we're saying we live in this broken world. And we're also saying Jesus Christ and this glorious gospel has the power to make what is wrong right. But we cannot make what is wrong right if we don't acknowledge that which is wrong. So you and I come and we say we're sinners and we acknowledge that, and the grace of God shows up every single time. There is not a time that God folds his arms, turns his back, and says, no, deal with your stuff on your own. Anytime his people or his child opens up their heart and says, God, I need your help, he always shows up. And I don't care if that's financial, emotional, physical, or if it's racial, whatever it is, God promises to show up. And what we're saying as a group of brothers right here, as a group of churches, as a group of people, we're saying, God, we're asking you to show up and use us to be the answer in the world.
And that is the truth. We have an opportunity. We have an incredible opportunity to actually be the answer. I don't have the answer. I don't know the answer, but Jesus is the answer. And if we start the conversation, he'll finish it. He's the author and the finisher of our faith. I think the best way that we walk through this, for me as a white man, is to keep loving my brothers, is to keep talking to my brothers, is to keep opening my heart and my home to people. Listen, here's what I've told our church before. Look through your text messages. If you haven't texted somebody of a different color in the last week, you might want to change that. You might want to open your world up a little bit. And you may say, well, how do I do that? Get in a group, get around somebody, reach out. You know, if a man wants to have friends, he's got to show himself friendly. There are people desperate for you to be in their world. Jesus said this, John chapter 13, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. I love you guys. I love your churches. I think it's amazing that we're able to come together. Jimmy, would you close us out in prayer, man? This has been so powerful. My hope is that people will take this conversation, share it, and let's see real change happen. Yeah, it's not going to happen overnight, and it's probably not going to happen with legislation. But where it's really going to happen is if we get people to the feet of Jesus. When I'm at the feet of Jesus, I actually see people as Jesus sees people, and it changes who I am and how I speak and how I see. So would you pray for us that God will change our hearts?
Absolutely. When Jesus and this woman start the conversation, she says to him, when he says, I can give you a drink, she says, well, do you have a rope long enough? And do you have a bucket? And I think in this time that we're in, we need to be around long enough to get to the depths of the pain. And we need to have a vessel that has the capacity to hold other people's reality. So, Father, we come to you right now, and we ask, God, in this moment that you would be with us. God, that we would love like your son Jesus loved. That our hearts would break for the things that breaks your heart. God, yes, we want to start with diversity, but we want to end at unity. We want to be unified with you in heaven as a company, as a people together. God, that it is not our skin color or our racial ethnic background or our socioeconomic status, God, that brings us to you. But what brings us to you is our need for grace, our universal need for you to cover what we're not. So, Father, what we're not, racist, non-racist, sin, whatever has caused distance in our relationship with you, let us first get our relationship vertically right with you so that we can get our relationship horizontally right with others. How can people know that we love you if we don't love the people that you created? convict us, compel us, commission us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
What a beautiful moment we were able to have together as a church family. Some of us might be a little bit heavy right now. Others of us might be a little bit confused. No matter where you are, I do want you to know that it's okay. And we're all on this journey together, and the grace of God is present for every single one of us. This conversation is just the start of you living out your life, becoming more like Jesus, me living out my life, becoming more like Jesus. There are so many issues in the world that we need to talk about, but let's at least talk about them. Let's have the conversation. As a church family, next week we're going to come together. We're going to talk about relationships and us getting back together and all of us learning what it's like to get out of this shelter-in-place season. But today, we needed to have this talk so we can all be pushed forward to become who God is calling us to be. If you're not a follower of Jesus, you can be. If you haven't yet surrendered your heart to Him, here's your moment. I want you to do me a favor right now. If that's you, you've never given your heart and your life to Christ. I want you to put your hand over your heart right now, and I'd like to ask you to repeat this prayer after me. Say, "Dear Jesus, I ask you to forgive me of all my sins. I admit I've made mistakes, and today I give you my heart, I give you my life. Give me the power to live for you. In Jesus' name, amen." Man, I pray that your heart is encouraged. You need to know all of heaven is throwing a party, and so are we. Welcome to the family. You don't have to be perfect. I know I'm not. We're on this journey together to understand what it means to be a follower of Jesus as He changes us and transforms us from the inside out. You need to know we love you. We are for you. And no matter how you found this message today, how you found Shoreline City, you're part of this family. We'd love for you to continue on this journey with us. Just go ahead, click on one of these buttons by my head, subscribe, let us know that you are here. Let us know that we get the chance to walk with you, and let us know that you're here, because we've been praying for you and we're already in your corner. As a matter of fact, you might be interested in knowing how you can partner with us to keep these messages coming and to help us continue to reach into the world and bring hope and life and healing. All you gotta do is click on that little box to give. We love the opportunity to partner with you to make it on earth as it is in heaven. Let's just go ahead and be the most generous, loving, encouraging, life-giving people we possibly can. Why not? God's changed us. Let's go ahead and love our world. I'm cheering you on. Can't wait to see you again.